Keys to the Shop, episode 176, Harnessing Emotions at Work, with Andrea Hoban of Oji Life Lab. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you're having an amazing day today, and I'm really excited to present this interview today because emotions are such an important part of what we do. And, emotional labor and emotional intelligence are probably one of the top two, if not the top two things that make or break us in the coffee service realm. We are emotionally laboring all day long in service, and how we can harness our emotions at work really will determine how fruitful we can be in our careers, in our businesses, and in our relationships too. So today we're going to dive into that head first with our special guest, Andrea Hoban. So I'm really excited to present that to you. Now, speaking of emotions, if you want to feel the emotion of joy and relief and satisfaction that you got the best equipment that you could find, that's the right equipment for the job, then may I suggest that you look to our sponsor, Prima Coffee, over at prima-coffee.com. Now, Prima Coffee is a leading specialty coffee equipment supplier, and what they do is they curate the best equipment from all over the world, and they fit that perfectly with what you need in your shop or in your home. Helping you succeed in making great coffee is basically what they're all about. It's what drives them. If you're looking for the best equipment and expert assistance to go along with it, then look no further than prima-coffee.com. Not only do they have an amazing selection, but when you're on the website, you'll also see a ton of great resources to use to educate yourself about the equipment and become a better professional, all for free because, again, Prima Coffee is all about spreading the love and helping you succeed in specialty coffee. So go to prima-coffee.com, reach out to them, let them know that you heard about them here on the show, and thank you so much, Prima, for your support of Keys to the Shop. Today's episode is also brought to you by the people that are making plant-based beverage consumers happy every day across the world, and that is the Pacific Barista Series. This is the line of plant-based performance beverages that are designed specifically for professional baristas and by professional baristas to match the standards for excellence that they have for everything they do behind the bar. Whether you're talking about almonds, soy, coconut, rice, or oat milk, its ability to take the heat from the steaming process, produce latte art ready silky texture, and then keep the flavor balance of the beverage focused on coffee. This makes the Barista Series a perfect choice for your cafe's menu. Pacific is a huge supporter of the specialty coffee community, and these products are just a testimony to that fact. So I recommend you go to pacificfoods.com, learn more about the Barista Series, get it in your store, see how it works with your coffee. I think you're going to love it, and I think your customers will love it as well. pacificfoods.com, and thank you so much, Pacific, for your support of Keys to the Shop. All right, so now, today we are going to be diving into the topic of harnessing your emotions at work. And if you're anything like me, you are an emotional person. In fact, if you're a person, you're emotional, and you can't remove your emotions when you go to work. Oftentimes what we try to do is we suppress our emotions, and it really is stressful when we do that. And we almost try to deny our emotions at work. And we might even be successful in some ways, like we wall ourselves off, but it gets bottled up, and not a lot of great things happen from that. I know I've been down that road, and you've probably been down that road today, or not too far in the past. But today's guest is going to talk to us about how we can stop denying our emotions at work and actually start to put our emotions to work for us, to harness our emotions at work and become practitioners of emotional intelligence and become kind of emotion scientists and engage in this emotional labor that goes along with our job in a healthy way. And I'm talking today with the perfect person to lead us down this path to success with our emotions at work, and that is Andrea Hoban, the co-founder and head of learning at Oji Life Lab. Andrea possesses more than 20 years of experience in leading large teams and building business. As a regional vice president in the staffing industry, she managed a $30 million P&L with a responsibility that stretched over a 4-state area. As a senior director of corporate learning, she established a global team of designers and trainers that deployed job skill training to 10,000 internal employees. She built a reputation on successfully leading enterprise-wide projects, building teams, and developing talent. She's a certified executive coach and leadership development practitioner who has helped hundreds of professionals learn to harness their emotions to achieve their goals. At OG, she is reimagining the way we learn skills like emotional intelligence to directly impact the quality of our lives. In addition, Andrea is a sought-after speaker, having presented at many state and national conferences. As an executive coach and facilitator, she works with individuals and teams to achieve goals to push past limitations. She has served as board president for herwisdom.org, school board president at St. Perpetua School in California, executive director of the Portland chapter of Women in Technology, member of the National Association of Female Executives, and a troupe member of Barren Mind Improv. I am so happy that I got the opportunity to talk with Andrea, and the conversation was just fantastic. And there are so many great pearls of wisdom that she shares in this conversation about emotions at work. We talk about mood regulation, increasing self-awareness, our blind spots and biases as we experience the emotions of other people, the correlation between emotions and business outcomes. And of course, we talk about emotional labor and self-care and recovery and so much more here. Honestly, I think this may be one of the most important episodes that you can play over and over again for yourself. There are a handful that I would recommend as being foundational to your professional growth, and this happens to be one of them. So, without further ado, let me present to you this conversation about harnessing emotions at work with Andrea Hoban of Oji Life Lab. Andrea, welcome to Keys to the Shop. So glad to get to talk to you today.
Thank you, Chris. It's really great to be here.
I'm excited to talk about this subject. We are obviously emotional beings and have no choice but to bring our emotions into work with us, and this is what you do and help people with at OG Life Labs. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your gravitation toward this type of work and how, what you do at OG Life Labs around it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've been involved in leadership development or mentorship or coaching, one of those kinds of activities for many, many years. And I have found over the years that the way that we see the world influences how we act. It influences our relationships. It influences so much about the way we are with ourselves and with others. And I found emotional intelligence to be part of that foundation and really felt a gravitational pull to bring this kind of work into the hands of as many people as I could. And so with 3 other co-founders, we established OG Life Lab as a way of bringing this kind of learning and to people so that we can all enhance the quality of our lives by learning these things. What makes, I think, the way we approach it really unique is though it comes to you in an app form. It's little bits of learning over a long period of time that include live interactions with coaches. And so that gives you a chance to practice over and over again and also get the support of a live person who's helping you understand how to consolidate what you've learned and bring it into action. So that's a little bit about what I'm doing and how I'm going about it. And I've had the chance to work with one of our co-founders, Dr. Mark Brackett out of Yale, who actually established the Yale Center of Emotional Intelligence. And he, along with our other co-founder, Robin Stern, have over the last 2 decades built a body of research around how emotions impact us in several aspects of our lives. And I can go into that into a minute. They have found research-backed ways of changing people's behavior to have better outcomes. Primarily, their work has been in schools, And so by taking their model, I've had a chance to bring that into the workplace and see firsthand how when you work the muscle of these new skills, it actually does help you improve things like your relationships and the quality of your decisions and so on.
That's really important, because so many results might just be, we might scratch our heads and wonder why we're not getting optimal results for our efforts. It might be because of others, and maybe because of ourselves and these emotions that we're bringing to work with us. And you said something that struck me, that with the application, you get people to practice these things. And as adults, I don't think we practice our emotions that much. We
right.
express our emotions, right? But I have a almost 6-year-old boy, and practice of emotion is actually a conversation every day. But as an adult, I don't get to hear that much about it. So it's wonderful that that's the approach and tact.
Yeah, well, when did we ever learn about our emotions? Like, when were we ever taught that? Like, what they are, how to modulate them according to our objectives or to the situation that we're in. I mean, we've received a lot of messages about how to manage our emotions as children that may or may not have served us into adulthood. And so, yes, you said something at the very beginning around, we all have emotions, and we are certainly bringing them to work with us every day. And so it behooves us to practice a little in terms of acknowledging what we're feeling for the purposes of regulating them according to our goals.
Well, let's ask this question then. And it seems like the gap that you're filling here with Oji Life Labs and your work is that we tend to deny our emotions when it comes to business. And there are a lot of, checklists and punch lists that we have to make sure we get an optimal result. But emotions usually don't make their way into that, and we can push them away and deny them. Why does this happen? How have you seen people deny their emotions, and why do we do this?
Well, I mean, we could probably talk for 2 hours about that. So let me give you some high-level observations. Like I mentioned before, we were never taught anything other than business is better served cold, leave our emotions at the door. And so we've created a habit in many circumstances, or a false belief that I can turn on or off my emotions. And I think we could understand that the fallacy of that, because we may in the moment say, I'm not going to say anything. I'm really frustrated right now, but I'm not going to say anything. And then we leave whatever situation we're in, and we take that frustration out on someone who doesn't deserve it. And so I like to think of emotional reactions like that as kind of a set of leaky buckets that they get out some way and somehow. And so to deny that we have emotion is not helpful. And to some extent, to really explore what we mean by this topic of emotional intelligence, we have to understand it's a set of skills that we can build over time. And when we do that, we get much better at recognizing what we're feeling. And when we do that, we're actually already supporting our ability to regulate according to whatever objective is in front of us. Maybe that's a better customer interaction. Maybe we're sitting at the table looking at a partnership. Maybe I'm at home with my family. And if I can recognize that I'm experiencing a strong, highly energized, maybe unpleasant emotion, when I can name it, Dr. Mark Brackett likes to say, you name it to tame it. So as soon as I can put my finger on what I'm feeling, then I'm already starting to regulate in a way that's helpful to having better relationships, or being able to pay attention with greater acuity, or perform at a higher level. So even that's a long walk around the block. But I would say that the part of the answer to your question, Chris, is we've just been taught that we think we can ignore them. And what we, I think, find in application in life is that we can for the moment, but it leaks out in other places that aren't really helpful.
That makes a lot of sense. If it doesn't go away, it's got to come out somehow, and you might as well be the one in charge of directing it instead of denying it. because you're more intelligent, I assume, than it, and you can tell it where to go and what to do. In terms of business, correlations that you've seen to harnessing emotions and achieving better outcomes, because I'm interested to hear your perspective on that, because the business is a dish best served cold phrase that you just said. It's interesting. Leave your emotions at the door. We are, I think, trying to become robots at work so that we're safe. We're trying to create a safe place by denying these things. Could you tell us about the positive correlation between harnessing emotions and achieving better business outcomes?
Yes, and I love that word you just used, harnessing. That when we get really proficient at recognizing what we feel, we actually can modulate, we can take hold of those emotions and use their power for the purpose of helping us actually achieve what we want to achieve. And so some of the things that have been reflected to me by some of our clients that have come through the Life Lab, the Emotion Life Lab, have been that they see improvements around how their teams can handle change. I mean, if you think about change management, it's such an emotional process. We generally don't like change when it's thrust upon us. And even when us as business owners or as leaders in an organization are asked to make decisions about change and move forward with change, it certainly invokes our own emotional response around the burden and the stress and perhaps the overwhelm that can entail. And so change management is a big area of emphasis. I see people wanting to really explore how these skills can help them work through that process. I had another gentleman who works at a large software corporation say that he sees that this kind of work supports risk reduction in a company. So the more aware I am of how I feel, the better I regulate in my emotions when I'm in meetings with other people, the more I pay attention to the work that I'm doing, the less likely I am to make a mistake on behalf of my company. And I never heard put that way before, but I thought that was very compelling. I think you can also see that strategic planning would also be well suited to, again, regulate your emotions in a way that allows for open thinking when you're wanting to put forth the big ideas. It turns out when we experience pleasant emotions, our ability to be open-minded, to take in more information, to learn, to listen deeply to others is enhanced. And so if I can harness the power of a pleasant feeling and a general, perhaps even a lower energy level emotion, maybe it's something like feeling gratitude, for example, I am much more likely to be able to blue sky big ideas. And then to be able to shift into how do I execute those ideas might mean that I start narrowing my cognitive window, which happens naturally when we experience unpleasant emotions. And again, I think this can be logically understood. We've all experienced that when we start feeling something like irritation or frustration, that we feel our cognitive window narrowing. We get tunnel vision. And in some cases, the emotions get so big, that's all we feel, or that's all we can see. And so if we use the power of knowing that we can narrow our cognitive focus and actually enhance our concentration, I might actually take advantage of a pessimistic mood to work on something where accuracy is really important, where there's a lot of complex details and I have to have a critical eye on getting them all right. So, it's not even just always feeling happy all the time. It's about what kind of emotions will really suit my purpose. And so the last thing I would say around another area that I hear a lot is around employee retention. So of course, if I am really present with people, again, I'm giving off signals of approachability, which we also do when we're experiencing pleasant emotions, then generally speaking, my employees will be more likely to speak up, to tell me the truth, to have an open and honest relationship with me, and for me to be able to retain their talent for longer.
Wow. Yeah, this is really hitting home, and my mind is just scrolling through the Rolodex of experiences I've had in coffee shops and different positions throughout the years where My cognitive window has been in various levels of open and shut, and, and it has not gone well, and it has gone well, but I've never really heard it put that you could use that narrow window where you get tunnel vision to and harness it for these detailed tasks. That's really interesting, and it seems like a positive way to steal that toxic energy that we associate with those moods and reframe it in a positive direction.
Exactly. So it's not like that I sit around trying to cultivate myself into a bad mood. But if I notice that around 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, I'm kind of, I've got lower energy, I'm a little on the cranky side, that's a good time for me to pull out that project that I haven't had time to work on, like maybe my taxes or maybe some detailed budget. That's not how I'm a people person. You might be able to tell. And I'd rather be doing this kind of work with you than doing that kind of detailed spreadsheet work. So when I know I feel that way, I'll harness that mood because I know I'll actually get a better result. That slightly pessimistic view on the world actually gives me an edge on paying attention to accuracy.
It reminds me of a book I recommend on this show a lot. Is called Setting the Table by a restaurateur, Danny Meyer. And it's all about hospitality. And one of the things he talks about is his moods. And he talks about how he likes to go to his restaurants a lot in person. But when he's in a bad mood, he tends to schedule himself away from the restaurants and does not make as many personal appearances because he knows how that's going to impact people when he has to be a personable person with his staff and with customers. And all of this really seems like a very purposeful journey in self-knowledge that we all talk about self-knowledge, but malleability in, the ability to reframe your emotions mixed with self-knowledge seems like the ultimate power.
Yeah, it really does become a superpower. And in the example that you just gave, it does show quite a bit of self-awareness and maybe an intuitive knowledge that, like I mentioned, when we are experiencing pleasant emotions, we're giving off cues to other people of approachability. So we make ourselves more emotionally accessible to other people. We're likely to have better conversations, to understand more deeply or see more broadly a situation that's in front of us. On the reverse side of that, when we experience unpleasant emotions, we give off cues of avoidance. And that's, that's pretty hardwired into our brains, actually. We're always looking for cues of safety or danger. And so, and from your example, this person, this restaurateur, it seems to be understanding that he doesn't want to give off those cues of avoidance, that he'd much rather be in the restaurants when he is giving off signals of approachability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the fact that those things are there, and you might not be able to you probably won't be able to shut them off, just like a faucet. So, and interestingly, he's in a position of authority. For a lot of the audience that's listening to this show, they're either on their way to becoming somebody who has direct reports, maybe managers or baristas in the coffee bar. Their emotions are part of what they're concerned about. Obviously this is something we should be improving and embracing. And they're contagious. Emotions are contagious. I wonder, does this go doubly true for people in positions of authority? Is it even more contagious for them?
Yes, absolutely. And there's been quite a lot of research that's done on this idea of emotions being contagious. And it turns out from the different research projects, they have found that contagion is actually given off by the person who has the most power in the room. And again, I'm sure you could think of a ton of examples where you've gone into situations where you were not the person that had the power in the room, but you certainly felt and caught the contagion that person was giving off.
Oh, yeah.
I can think of plenty of times, even in a corporate environment, stepping into a meeting, being in a good mood, but seeing the senior leader who was to lead the meeting step in a bad mood, and it changes everything about that meeting. All of us are impacted by that contagion. And so to understand that power is associated with the contagion then we as leaders can harness this idea by asking ourselves, do I want people to catch what I'm giving? If the answer is no, then I might need to do some things before I go into a situation and I rub off the wrong things on people. Mm-hmm. Because again, I might be shutting down ideas. I might not be getting important information from people in the room that can help us make a better decision. When I shut that possibility down because people are reading my cues of avoidance because they see that I'm upset about something or I'm short or I'm ill-tempered, then I cut off channels of important communication. And so to ask myself that question of, do I want people to catch what I'm feeling? If the answer is no, then I might need to take a walk outside, get something to drink, and take a moment for myself. A very short and effective strategy is to simply take a conscious breath, because that brings me back into the present moment. It downregulates my nervous system and supports my ability to broaden my cognitive window. So another question that you can ask that would also get at this issue is, what's it like to be around me right now? And while that question sounds self-centered, it really is widening the frame to this idea of contagion. Would I want to be around me right now? Am I difficult to talk to because of the feeling that I'm experiencing? And if so, what can I do about that to get a better outcome?
That's a hard question to ask when you're a leader, because a lot of us want to be the image of perfection to those we lead, and to show weakness is to allow weakness in others. And we try to not be, well, I'd say maybe we don't try consciously to not be vulnerable, but I think it's somewhat of an assumption that vulnerability can cheapen your authority, especially if you're a new leader. If you're just starting a business and you've got people answering to you, it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to admit these things about yourself, especially when it comes to people telling you these things about you, which is kind of where I was thinking of going here, where you were talking about what's it like to be around me. Well, I mean, you could just ask your staff in some form. You could do 360 reviews or something like that. Is this something that you would recommend to people wanting to know actually what it is like to be around them?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, it's something that we do within our own Emotion Life Lab, where we have people fill out a 3-minute survey. They send it out to several colleagues and people in their personal life to get some feedback around how they're observed in terms of expressing their emotions and helping other people regulate, which we call co-regulation. So if I'm regulated enough where I can feel calm and grounded and be a good listener, then chances are I can also help the room feel that way, because emotions are contagious. So if other people are frustrated, can I calm the whole room down? So again, we can really achieve something big together. So these ideas are really both internal, but they're also interactive. They're social in terms of our interactions with other people. So yes, I highly recommend finding a trusted colleague, someone who will tell you the truth and do it in a way that's helpful to you, to say, I'm really curious about the way I show up in meetings that can be stressful. Can you, after the meeting, give me some feedback on when I might have inadvertently shut down people's ideas?
I'm thinking about a time where I brought a manager to tears because I was unapproachable, and I did not know I was unapproachable. It was told to me, maybe too late, but how I was showing up in my position as a manager of managers was so, maybe it was abrupt, and I had no idea, because I live with me. I'm the fish in water, right? I'm used to it. And I bet
you don't want to be abrupt. It's you have no idea that that's the way you're coming across.
I really do feel like this is so critical for especially the coffee industry, because there's so many first-time leaders, and people who are promoted to positions of authority without a lot of leadership training, let alone knowledge of themselves. So starting on this journey early, I hope everyone listening is really taking some good notes and going to start down this path for themselves as early as they possibly can, because it's so critical. In terms of having this knowledge of how you show up, it's like we're closing the gap between our intention and our actions. And that is kind of a way of describing emotional labor. I wonder if you would talk a little bit about emotional labor and how it plays into all this, because now that we know we can't deny our emotions at work, and we've got to work with them, it becomes a tool, and it can be wearisome. Can you define emotional labor for us?
Yes, absolutely. And I want to come back to one idea that ties into this that you just spoke about, Chris, which is that we don't, as new leaders, want to be perceived as vulnerable. And I think that plays into why we labor emotionally sometimes. And I just want to be clear that when we're using our emotional intelligence skill, it doesn't mean that we're simply being nice and happy all the time. It actually means that I'm so self-aware that I can recognize that this information that you've just given me as my employee really disappoints me. And in that moment of disappointment, which at its root cause is about an unmet expectation, can I use my disappointment as an education tool for this employee? So it's not about hiding the fact or showing that I'm invulnerable. It's actually expressing my disappointment in that I expected X and you've brought me Y, and I want to support your growth as an employee, but we have to agree that Y is not acceptable. That shows greater emotional intelligence than pretending I wasn't bothered in the first place. So to answer your question, emotional labor, again, I'll use Mark Brackett's definition of it because there are many out there, and I find this one to be really practically helpful, which is emotional labor is the distance between what I feel internally and what I express externally in terms of my words, my body language, my tone, etc. So when I am expressing something I do not feel, I'm laboring emotionally. When I have to pretend I don't feel anything, but I actually am, that's emotional labor. And so you're right. In any customer-facing industry, we will have to emotionally labor at times. And as leaders, we will have to do that at times, because part of our professional competence is to establish a certain confidence in our leadership and be forward thinking. And so something might hit us sideways, and we have to take a deep breath and continue to be the voice of motivation and show that we can lead an effort forward. That said, if we find that throughout the day we're constantly laboring emotionally, meaning I am upset a lot and cannot express it for some reason or another, then that is quite fatiguing on our system. And we can be very depleted by that effort. And so over time, we can find that we have mental or physical consequences as a result of that extensive emotional labor. So in this kind of industry, it helps to acknowledge that there will be times where we will have to, quote, put on a happy face or be cheerful, exude cheerfulness when we don't actually feel cheerful. But when we do it more often than we think we may have to, then we have to start asking ourselves, why am I doing that? Why can't I say what I'm actually feeling? Is there a way for me to express unpleasant emotions in a way that's authentic and contextually appropriate? And so I start reducing the amount of time that I need to labor and its intensity, and that's helpful for my overall well-being. So that's a kind of a walk around the block about emotional labor. Again, I could go on and on about it just because I think all of us have experienced it and we never knew it had a name. Mm-hmm. And we also know that when we experience it a lot, it is very tiring and it takes some recovery. And so that's really the last piece of advice I give for those of us who find that there are days where we are laboring more than others. Can I build in some recovery time so that I can do something that actually helps build my energy back up? Maybe it's taking a walk. Maybe it's sitting with my dog on the couch. Maybe it's listening to music that really uplifts me. Something that just starts building energy and that pleasantness back into my system so that I have some reserve for the next time.
Oh, that's really great advice. And that self-care journey, it's so important that you figure out what those recharge actions are. And you said something about how is it that I can be authentic and contextually appropriate at the same time? And I wonder if you would talk a little bit more about that in terms of tactics or insights that would help us to get creative with what we do. Because part of me thinks, oh, well, in the end, maybe this isn't the job for you. And maybe that's true for some people that just fall into a role because it was available, but quickly find that they can't recover from those emotional labors. But for those of us who want to stay in it long term, yet want to be, emotionally laboring in a sustainable way, how do we go about finding those contextually appropriate but authentic expressions?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it, Chris? I think it's different for all of us. And my biggest recommendation is for ways to reduce the amount of labor that we have to endure. And so, like the example you gave from the restaurateur earlier, maybe there's ways for you to excuse yourself from the front desk, from from customer interactions for a while until you can find that recovery period. That might be one strategy. Another strategy, maybe, I know that I've got some news for my employees that isn't going to go over well. And so it's a difficult message, and I will have to possibly exhibit some emotional labor. But how can I, again, be my authentic self, express myself in a way that feels authentic, but doesn't derail the whole effort? So that's, I think, a very individual decision. And I've seen people do it extremely well, and I've seen people do it extremely poorly. I remember one leader at one organization who was describing that some layoffs had been made. And this was in a room of several, I want to say about 50 people. And before she could get the words out of her mouth that layoffs had been made that morning, she started crying.
Oh, no.
And we all thought somebody had died. and oddly, we were relieved to find out that our colleagues had only been laid off.
Oh, no.
So that's an authentic expression, but probably not a helpful one in that context.
Mm-hmm. What would have been a better course for her if you were counseling her on that? What's a better way to be authentic in front of folks?
Yeah, in that kind of situation, to talk about how much I, as a leader, loved working with these colleagues, what contribution they have made to the organization, and how that will never be forgotten, how we are going to do whatever it takes to help them find their next job. I will absolutely do that. And it is with a very heavy heart to tell you that these are the people that were laid off today. Mm-hmm. So again, I'm really sharing with you that it upsets me, and that that I also care about their well-being, but I can't lose it in front of that group and maintain the composure I need to get the group to move forward. And so part of what I find to be a really helpful aspect of wanting to use the skills of emotional intelligence is having an important objective in front of me. So in that kind of layoff situation, to say, what's important when I go into this meeting is to share how much I care about the people that were let go, how much I care about the people in the room, and how much more I need from them now while we go through this difficult time. If I can hold that and say, how can I really be a best version of myself to meet that objective? Then I'm much more likely to be able to do that than if I go into the meeting in the middle of my very large, overwhelming emotional experience of having to lay off people that I really care about.
Oh, yeah. No, that's so wise. And it sounds like that emotion in the second example where you were saying what she could have done was tempered by other emotions that are also authentic. Not like she's an emotional monolith with only mourning to give to people, but also has thankfulness to temper the mourning and things like that. Is that helpful to sort of...
Oh gosh, I think that's so well said. Yes, and it also makes me think about the other side of it. Like, think about this leader if she'd walked in stone cold with no expression and just reported the news. What effect would that have had on all of us that were in the room? It would have been as bad as the first reaction, possibly worse. So, in that case, coming back to one of your earlier questions, to deny that she was feeling anything wouldn't have been helpful to the outcome. To have an unmitigated expression of her deepest feeling about it wasn't helpful to the outcome she was looking for. But finding the middle way is one that shows that she's a human being just like we all are, that she cares, and work needs to get done.
In these situations where we've got to keep it together and there's a lot of there can be a lot of tension, there can be a lot of missing people, and you earlier used the word deep listening as a way to go about interacting with others you work with. We just had Oscar Trimboli, who has a book called Deep Listening that just came out. That's a very, very good primer on that. But it got me thinking about the idea that we shut people down when we make presumptions about them before they even speak. And generational differences are a huge part of the workplace. A lot of people who open coffee bars they can be older for the most part than the people they hire. How do you manage the gap between generations, and is there one emotionally to manage?
Yeah, I think you're pointing towards, I don't find a clear delineation by generation that we express ourselves in certain ways. Like you said, like there's plenty of millennials that are stoic, and there's plenty of boomers and Gen Xers out there that are highly volatile, shall we say. But what I do find to be really useful is, one, to acknowledge that emotions are information. And when we ignore this information, we do it at our own peril. And that includes how we are feeling internally, and also by what we see being expressed to us. Now, the other thing I would say about that is, when we see someone expressing perhaps a big emotion in our minds, we are seeing that through our own filter, through our own life experience. And this is what I think your comment really points towards, Chris, is that when we, from my life experience, if I see someone having an outburst, I think, wow, I would never do that. That just seems so inappropriate. Like I would, my preference is to hold all my emotions and pretend that they're in a little box and stuff them away. How weird. So there's this judgment that happens, an appraisal that happens based on everything that we bring into that moment, the way we were raised, our gender, our race, our social situation, all of that is support or not support comes into how we see someone else express. And so we have to understand that we are biased in the way that we see other people expressing emotion, because we think people do it like we do. And so when I see arms crossed when I'm talking to an employee, I may think, gosh, she's really angry. and not listening. And I might actually find out if I asked her that she's simply cold.
Big difference.
And right, big difference in terms of how my interaction might go. And so the more we can, again, as Dr. Brackett talks about being an emotion scientist, meaning can we have a growth mindset around what emotions I personally experience myself and how I see other people expressing around me, rather than being an emotion judge. And in order to be a good emotion scientist means I have to invoke some curiosity and to ask. And so when I see someone having a big emotional reaction to something, I have to catch myself going, wow, he's really reacting to that in a way I didn't expect. To then say, oh, I wonder what that's about. And to say, hey, it looks like you're really upset by what I just said. Am I reading that right? And allow them to respond and perhaps give me some new information that changes the course of our communication trajectory.
It might change their behavior as well, because now they know how they're showing up to others.
Exactly. And they might have blinds, just like your example around you didn't know that you were giving off the signal of abruptness. Someone had to communicate that to you.
Mm-hmm. Well, if we want to take what we've learned in this interview and through your work and apply it tomorrow to our situations, what kind of mentality would you advise we adopt in order to make room for this critical area of harnessing our emotions? What kind of steps should we take to get on the right road and have a healthy relationship with our emotions and the emotions of others, in fact?
Yeah, thank you. I love this question. Makes me come back to this idea of being an emotion scientist. Can we apply that idea to our own emotional experience and start looking at our emotions as simple information and not judge what we're experiencing? So many times I catch myself doing this, like, this makes me feel really sad. I shouldn't feel sad. Sadness is bad. I should feel happy. Like we do this 1,000 times a day. And so if we can understand and come back to like, I feel sad. I wonder what the sadness is about. Oh yeah, I just got this bad news about a loved one. Wow, I need to sit with that for a minute. Okay, so I have a meeting in 5 minutes and I still feel sad, but I have a big objective I need to achieve in that meeting. So how can I start to shift? Do I need to come back and what can I do with my family member later on? We start to be able to harness our emotions a lot more effectively when we're in contact with what we're feeling. And so, where I really see the rubber meeting the road is to start noticing what you're feeling. And a very practical way of doing that is to write down, what am I actually feeling? And we might actually start learning we have a pretty limited vocabulary. I feel good. I feel bad. And we have, there's over 2,000 words in the English language that describe some form of an emotional state. So can we start parsing with more detail? Oh, I feel really peeved right now.
Yeah.
And that supports me downshifting from peeved perhaps into something more pleasant before that becomes irritation or frustration or rage, which is much harder to downregulate.
Oh, yeah. Especially when you have coffee fueling your emotions.
Exactly. So I might want to write down what I'm feeling many times a day just to get a sense of where do I live emotionally. And my recommendation is that you tag that activity to something you already do. Maybe it's every time you fill your coffee mug. Maybe it's every time you take something to the back office. Maybe it's every time you greet a customer. I don't know, but you have some place where you could say, wow, I'm feeling really optimistic right now. And you can write that down. And so you start to build a vocabulary. You start to become much more aware of your inner state. And that's really the gateway to looking at how you can harness your emotions for the purposes of what you're trying to achieve.
This whole conversation, I think, is such a needed one, and I hope it's the beginning of a long and constant journey for people to better understand their emotions. Where can we learn more about your work and what you all do at Oji Life Lab?
Well, you can certainly find us on our website, ojlifelab.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. Those are probably the two best ways to find me. And you can find me as Andrea Hoban. Of course, I've got Oji Life Lab in my profile. But yeah, those are probably the easiest places to find me. And I'd be happy to have a discussion with anyone. I would also offer, Chris, how about this? We'll put the rubber meets the road. For the first person from this podcast that finds me on LinkedIn and wants to try the Emotion Life Lab, which is normally a $349 cost, I'll let them use it for free. And so that way, if there's somebody out there who really wants to explore and learn over time and build the skill in a way that really can be taken into all elements of their life, they have access to be able to do that.
Wow, that's very generous. Thank you so much. That's I think that makes us feel the emotion of excitement.
Very good.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for joining us on the show. This was a real treat to get to talk to you and learn from your expertise. It's really been great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Well, as promised, there is so much to think about, and this conversation about how we can harness our emotions at work. Some of the things that really stood out to me, how we can harness those emotions when we're feeling a bit more negative. When she was talking about the cognitive window being closed or narrowed, we got that tunnel vision and working on detailed projects and not necessarily people projects. That I think that's really wise. And for me, I think it was really interesting how she was talking about naming the emotions and recognizing them as they're coming up, and how at first it's going to be kind of difficult because you just think, I feel bad, and then you want to get more specific as you go. And to me, and I didn't say it in the conversation, but I was thinking it, this sounds a lot like when you first learn to taste coffee and you kind of pick up the notes of the coffee as being macro notes, like chocolate. And chocolate is great, and we use that no matter how senior you are in the coffee industry. But as you start to really connect your brain to your palate, you become a little bit more sensitive to the nuances and the variations. So it's no longer just chocolate. Maybe it's more like milk chocolate, or maybe it's not even chocolate. Maybe it's more roasted nuts and things like that. You can get even more detailed, of course, we all know. But it seems very similar to what she was talking about when it comes to connecting your brain to your emotions and being able to name specifically what's going on, rather than just to write it off as this, major headline of an emotion. And once you get specific, you can notice patterns, you can take action more effectively, and there's just so much. And I would encourage you to re-listen to this episode, and you can find the transcript for this episode also in the newsletter. If you're signed up for the Keys to the Shop weekly newsletter, it gives you some resources as well as the transcript to the show and bonus audio. We continued recording and talking about this subject after this conversation ended, and that content is available exclusively to Keys to the Shop email subscribers. And you can sign up for that over at keystotheshop.com. Also, don't forget Andrea's offer. The first person to reach out to her on LinkedIn gets the Emotional Life Lab that Oji Life Lab has created. This is a breakthrough digital learning system that builds your emotional intelligence skills, and it's appropriate for teams, organizations, and individuals. And it's a $349 value. You get it for free if you're the first person to reach out to Andrea from listening to this show. So be sure to get in on that. Big thank you to Andrea for breaking down this subject for us and for helping us harness our emotions. This was really spectacular. Thank you, Andrea. We really appreciate you and the work you do. If you want more information about what Andrea does, you can go to ojlifelab.com. That's OJI lifelab.com. And of course, you can go visit Andrea on LinkedIn as well. Now, if you want to reach out to me, you can do so by emailing chris@keystotheshop.com with your questions, comments, and feedback. And of course, if you're interested in working with Keys to the Shop consulting and training to help you with training your employees, bettering your operations, assessing your business, then you can also reach out there, chris@keystotheshop.com. Would love to have a conversation with you. And that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. I appreciate every single one of you. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.